All right. So today I'm going to be reading The Veldt by Bradbury. I'm going to kind of read it the same exact way that I would in class, so I'm going to stop and ask you to think about a few things whenever I notice a signpost. And I'm going to ask myself what the author is wanting me to know. So I won't talk too much. Joseph, I know this has been taking all day. I've been doing it a million times. Sorry. All right. The Veldt. George, I wish you'd look at the nursery. What's wrong with it? I don't know. Well then, I just want you to look at it is all, or call a psychologist in to look at it. What would a psychologist want with a nursery? Contrast and contradiction. That's weird. That's something normal, not normal. Okay? Why might the author write this way? Maybe this is going to lead us to details in the plot. This might be a foreshadow. What's going to happen in that nursery? Okay. You know very well what he'd want. His wife paused in the middle of the kitchen and watched the stove busy humming to itself, making supper for four. It's just that the nursery is different now than it was. All right, let's have a look. They walked down the hall of their soundproofed Happy Life home. The irony, which had cost them $30,000 installed. This house which clothed and fed and rocked them to sleep, and played and sang and was good to them. Their approach sensitized a switch somewhere, and the nursery light flicked on, and when they came in within 10 feet of it, Similarly, behind them in the halls, lights went on and off as they left them behind, with a soft automaticity. Okay. Well, said George Hadley. They stood on the thatched floor of the nursery. It was 40 feet across by 40 feet long and 30 feet high. Again, that's a crazy nursery, like a playroom or a baby's room. It had cost half again as much as the rest of the house. But nothing's too good for our children, George had said. The nursery was silent. It was empty as a jungle glade at hot high noon. Foreshadow? The walls were blank and two-dimensional. Now, as George and Lydia Hadley stood in the center of the room, the walls began to purr and recede into crystalline distance, it seemed, and presently an African veldt appeared. In 3 dimensions, on all sides, in color, reproduced to the final pebble and bit of straw. The ceiling above them became a deep sky with a hot yellow sun. George Hadley felt the perspiration start on his brow. Let's get out of the sun, he said. This is a little too real, but I don't see anything wrong. Wait a minute. You'll see, said his wife. Now the hidden odorophonics were beginning to blow a wind of odor at the 2 people in the middle of the baked veldland. The hot straw smell of lying grass, the cool green smell of the hidden water hole, the great rusty smell of animals, the smell of dust like a red paprika in the hot air, and now the sounds, the thump of distant antelope feet on grassy sod, the paper rustling of vultures. A shadow passed through the sky. The shadow flickered on George Hadley's upturned, sweating face. Filthy creatures, he heard his wife say. The vultures. You see, there are the lions, far over, that way. Now they're on their way to the water hole. They've just been eating, said Lydia. I don't know what. Some animal. George Hadley put his hand up to the shield off the burning light from his squinted eyes. A zebra or a baby giraffe, maybe? Are you sure? His wife sounded peculiarly tense. No, it's a little late to be sure, he said, amused. Nothing over there I can see but clean bone and the vultures dropping for what's left. Did you hear that scream? She asked. No. About a minute ago? Sorry, no. The lions were coming, and again George Hadley was filled with admiration for the mechanical genius who had conceived this room, a miracle of efficiency selling for an absurdly low price, for every home should have one. Oh, occasionally they frightened you with their clinical accuracy. They startled you, gave you a twinge, but most of the time, what fun for everyone, not only your own son or daughter, but for yourself. When you felt like a quick jaunt to a foreign land, a quick change of scenery, well, here it was. Okay, so now I'm going to pause in case you're not sure. So the nursery is a room that you can go inside of, and it's essentially a playroom for their children, but it's really for everyone. And when you're in there, you can imagine wherever you want to be. And wherever you want to be, it will appear. But the room is supposed to shut off when you leave, right? But can you imagine, just for a second, I'm already 5 minutes in, I don't want to talk too long, how nice that would be to feel on those days where you just feel so trapped in going through the motions of just doing the same thing in these monotone lives that we have, right? And you can just go in your nursery, close the door, and be like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to the Bahamas today. And just, boom, there it is. Let me chill on the beach and just take a minute. And then when you've got to get back to everything else, you can just kind of, okay, back to the real world. You don't have to pay for a flight and miss work or miss school or any of those things. Like, how nice would that be? But then, where do we draw the line? Okay. And here were the lions now, 15 feet away, so real, so feverishly and startlingly real that you could feel the prickling fur on your hand, and your mouth was stuffed with the dusty upholstery smell of their heated pelts, and the yellow of them was in your eyes like the yellow of an exquisite French tapestry, the yellows of lions in summer grass, and the sound of the matted lion lungs exhaling on the silent noontide, and the smell of meat from the panting, dripping mouths. The lions stood looking at George and Lydia Hadley with terrible green-yellow eyes. "Watch out!" screamed Lydia. The lions came running at them. Lydia bolted and ran instinctively. George sprang after her outside in the hall with the door slammed. He was laughing and she was crying, and they both stood appalled at the other's reactions. "George! Lydia! Oh, my dear, poor, sweet Lydia! They almost got us!" "Walls, Lydia, remember, crystal walls. That's all they are. Oh, they look real, I must admit. Africa in your parlor, but it's all dimensional. Super reactionary, super sensitive, color film, and mental tape behind glass screens. It's all odorophonics and sonics, Lydia. Here's my handkerchief." "I'm afraid." She came to him and put her body against him and cried steadily. "Did you see? Did you feel? It's too real." "Now, Lydia, you've got to tell Wendy and Peter not to read any more on Africa." Of course, he patted her. "Promise?" "Sure. And lock the nursery for a few days until I can get my nerves settled." You know how difficult Peter is about that. When I punished him a month ago by locking the nursery for even a few hours, the tantrum he threw, and Wendy too. They live for the nursery. It's got to be locked, and that's all there is to it. All right. Reluctantly, he locked the huge door. "You've been working too hard. You need a rest." I don't know, she said, blowing her nose, sitting down in a chair that immediately began to rock and comfort her. Creepy. "Maybe I don't have enough to do. Maybe I have time to think too much. Why don't we shut the whole house off for a few days and take a vacation?" "You mean you want to fry my eggs for me?" "Yes," she nodded. "And damn my socks?" "Yes," a frantic, watery-eyed nodding. "And sweep the house?" Yes, oh yes." "But I thought that's why we bought this house, so we wouldn't have to do anything." "That's just it. I feel like I don't belong here. The house is wife and mother now, and nursemaid, which takes care of the children. Can I compete with an African Veldt? Can I give a bath and scrub the children as efficiently or quickly as the automated scrub bath can? I cannot. And it isn't just me. It's you. You've been awfully nervous lately. I suppose I have been smoking too much. You look as if you didn't know what to do with yourself in this house, either. You smoke a little more every morning and drink a little more every afternoon and need a little more sedative every night. You're beginning to feel unnecessary too." "Am I?" He paused and tried to feel into himself to see what was really there. Oh, George. She looked beyond him at the nursery door. Those lions can't get out of there, can they? He looked at the door and saw it tremble as if something had jumped against it from the other side. Of course not, he said. Something is wrong there because the nursery's supposed to shut off when they leave the room. And lions are still pouncing at the door. Okay. At dinner, they ate if this is a good stopping point if you want to stop for the day. I'm going to keep reading those so that you can remember at 10:40 to pick back up or whatever. I'm going to go ahead and try to read the whole thing if I can. At dinner, they ate alone, for Wendy and Peter were at a special plastic carnival across town and had televised home to say they'd be late to go ahead eating. So George Hadley bemused sat watching the dining room table produce warm dishes of food from its mechanical interior. We forgot the ketchup, he said. Sorry, said a small voice within the table, and ketchup appeared. Contrast and contradiction. As for the nursery, thought George Hadley, it won't hurt for the children to be locked out of it for a while. Too much of anything isn't good for anyone. Words of the wiser, baby, words of the wiser. Too much of anything isn't good for anyone. Does that sound like a thematic statement? And it was clearly indicated that the children had been spending a little too much time on Africa. That sun, he could feel it on his neck, still, like a hot paw. Ooh, what might that foreshadow? And the lions, and the smell of the blood. Remarkable how the nursery caught the telepathic emanations of the children's minds and created life to fill their every desire. The children thought lions, and there were lions. The children thought zebras, and there were zebras. Sun, sun. Giraffes, giraffes. Death, and death. So now it's almost like godlike. That last, he chewed tastelessly on the meat that the table had cut for him. Death thoughts. They were awfully young, Wendy and Peter, for death thoughts. Or, no, you were never too young, really. Long before you knew what death was, you were wishing it on someone else. When you were 2 years old and you were shooting people with cat pistols. But this, the long, hot African veldt, the awful death in the jaws of a lion and repeated again and again. Where are you going? He didn't answer Lydia. Preoccupied, he let the lights glow softly on ahead of him, extinguished behind him as he padded to the nursery door. He listened against it. Far away, a lion roared. He unlocked the door and opened it. Just before he stepped inside, he heard a faraway scream, and then another roar from the lions which subsided quickly. He stepped into Africa. How many times in the last year had he opened this door and found Wonderland, Alice, the Mock Turtle, or Aladdin and his magical lamp, or Jack Pumpkinhead of Oz, or Dr. Dolittle, or the cow jumping over real appearing moon, all the delightful contraptions of a make-believe world. How often had he seen Pegasus flying in the sky ceiling, or seen fountains of red fireworks, or heard angel voices singing. But now, it's hot yellow Africa, this bake oven with murder in the heat. Foreshadow. Perhaps Lydia was right. Perhaps they needed a little vacation from the fantasy, which was growing a bit too real for 10-year-old children. It was all right to exercise one's minds with gymnastic fantasies, but when the lively child mind settled on one pattern, it seemed that at a distance for the past month he had heard lions roaring and smelling their strong odor seeping as far away as the study door. Remember earlier in the text, previously he said that about a month ago, the kids threw a tantrum because he locked the door on the nursery for a couple days. Ever since that time, they've been fantasizing about something happening. Okay. But being busy, he had paid no attention to it. George Hadley stood on the African grassland alone. The lions looked up from their feeding, watching him. The only flaw to the illusion was the open door through which he could see his wife, far down the dark hall, like a framed picture, eating her dinner abstractedly. Go away, he said to the lions. They did not go. He knew the principle